Good afternoon, all. This is Richard Hackett with Community Planning and Permitting. We are recording. You may begin.
Thanks, Rick. The September 1st meeting of the Boulder County Planning Commission will now come to order. This is Commissioner Bloomfield. I'll just say that I'm having some audio and video difficulties, so I will be turning off my video as I'm speaking, and I'll try and remember to turn it on when I'm not speaking. Okay, due to COVID-19 concerns, this meeting is being held virtually. Information on how to participate in the virtual meeting has been posted on the Planning Commission webpage at www.boco.org/PC. There will be opportunity to remotely provide public comment on the dockets if the Planning Commission decides for this one. And we'll get into more detail on that. And I'll provide instructions when we get there. Okay, so we'll start with a roll call. Mark Bloomfield here, Sam Fitch.
Present.
Ann Goldfarb.
Here.
Gavin McMillan.
Here.
Chris Whitney.
Here.
And I don't believe we have Misha Gardner yet, but she should be joining us shortly. So we will check in with her when she gets on. I'll remind the planning commissioners of the following. Please identify yourself before speaking and speak slowly and clearly. All votes will be roll call votes. Please keep your video on when possible during the hearing. Please remain on mute until you are ready to speak. When you begin speaking, please identify yourself as a planning commissioner. For instance, this is Planning Commissioner Ann Goldfarb. It may help to keep your participant list open in Zoom so that you can see who's speaking. The person who is speaking will be bolded. I don't imagine we have any staff updates, but I'll ask for those before we go.
This is Anna Milner, staff. There are no staff updates.
Okay. So today's meeting is to continue the table docket item SU-22-0003 Dowe Flats Mining and Reclamation Extension. Before we begin, I wanted to outline the process around further public comment, both for the public and for my fellow commissioners. Because the public comment portion of this document this docket item has already been closed, it is up to the discretion of the Planning Commission as to whether it should be reopened. Once we've heard updates from the staff and the applicant, and commissioners have had a chance to ask questions of both the staff and the applicant, we'll have a short discussion to see if the new information provided warrants reopening of public discussion, or if we feel that the presentations were just clarifying information that was already available for public comment in the last hearing. A motion to reopen public comment can also limit comments from the public in a few ways, including limiting comments to the new information provided, limiting the time for comment to 1 or 2 minutes, etc. So if we have a motion to reopen public comment, we could limit it in certain ways. If we have a reopening vote and that passes, then I'll explain the public comment at that time. Okay. So this is a public hearing for docket SU-22-0003 Dowe Flats Mining and Reclamation Extension. We'll reopen the public hearing and we'll start with a staff update from Pete Larange.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Pete Larange, CP&P staff. Let me share my presentation.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, assuming everyone can see that. Wanted to give just a quick recap of what happened at the August 17th Planning Commission hearing. Subsequent to staff and applicant presentations, the Planning Commission heard from, according to my records, 36 speakers. At that August 17th meeting, Planning Commission voted to table the case with a request for additional information and clarification from staff and the applicant. Items on that include questions surrounding the legal nonconformity of the Lyons Quarry and Cement Plant, the cumulative public health impacts of an additional 15 years, possible ways to mitigate those effects, information and data on CO2 emissions, some additional information from staff on the separation of the Dowe Flats Quarry and Lyons Quarry and Cement Plant in the analysis, and a question about why 15 years was necessary to complete the work. So with that in mind, a summary of the written comments that we have received to date. Prior to the August 17th Public Planning Commission meeting, we had received 106 comments, 7 in support, 85 in opposition, and 14 in the other category. Since that time, we have received an additional 139 comments, 3 in support, 135 in opposition, and 1 in other. That brings the total number to 237 comments, 10 in support, 212 in opposition, and 15 other. Staff would note that multiple comments from individuals, if someone submitted multiple comments, each of those are tallied individually. So if someone submitted 3 comments, those 3 are represented in the total number as 3 comments, not as 1. First thing that the commission asked staff to provide a little more information on was the legal nonconformity of the Lyons Quarry. Under the Boulder County Land Use Code, Article 4-1003A, it states that any existing use which does not conform to the use regulations of this code for the zoning district in which such nonconforming use is located as a result of either the adoption or amendment of code or a final administrative or judicial decision. This is considered to be a legal nonconforming use. In the case of the Lyons Quarry and the cement plant, both of those operations were established in accordance with the applicable Boulder County zoning regulations in effect at the time, and are such considered legal nonconforming. For the cement plant, we have building permits for the initial earthwork and site prep from 1965, and for the actual construction of the initial plant in 1967. Mining and mineral processing uses, and mineral processing use would include a cement processing plant, were allowed by right in the general industrial zoning district at that time. The Lyons Quarry and the cement plant became legal nonconforming. The cement plant became legal nonconforming in 1994 when the Boulder County Land Use Code was amended to include a requirement that industrial uses in the general industrial district be subject to special use review. As for the quarry, it was established in 1977. It was also allowed by right in the industrial district at that time. It became legal nonconforming a year later in 1978 when the special use review requirement was added for open mining uses. The Lyons Quarry did require at the time, and still does require, a mining permit from the state of Colorado. That's mining permit M 1977-208. At that time, the state permit did require consultation with local officials, but did not require any local approvals. And the reclamation plan, as part of that permit, requires that the operator, quote, put the land back to as near the original land use as possible. And that includes the removal of structures on the site. With the establishment of that state permit in 1977, the cement plant was rolled into that permit. It became part of that mining permit. And therefore, the cement plant and the Lyons Quarry are considered a single operation for the purposes of the state permit. Under the state permit, mining activities include both excavation, so the removal of materials from the ground, as well as the processing of those materials. So the cement plant is the processes the materials removed from the ground and is considered a mining activity under the state permit. As stated, both the cement plant and the lines quarry were allowed at the time that they were established, and they both became non-conforming through changes to the Boulder County Land Use Code. Article 4-1003B states that a non-conforming use may be continued and normal or routine maintenance of a structure containing a non-conforming use shall be permitted. Normal or routine maintenance shall include any maintenance or repair which does not impermissibly enlarge or alter the structure containing the non-conforming use. So in other words, as long as it continues to operate as it has, it does not expand, it is considered legal non-conforming and is allowed to continue under the Boulder County Land Use Code. The Lions Quarry and the cement plant could, as a legal non-conforming use, continue to operate until such time as the operator decides to voluntarily cease operations. Again, that is assuming that they remain in compliance with this article of the code and they do not lose nonconformity through impermissible expansion or alterations. Any deconstruction of the plant would terminate that legal nonconformity on the site. So any new development on the Lions Quarry site would be subject to the regular land use review requirements. The board also asked for some additional information on the public health impacts. As staff has stated previously, because the Dowe Flats mining operation and the Lions Quarry cement plant operation are separate uses under the land use code, staff's analysis focused on the impacts of the Dowe Flats operations. According to information available from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the operating permit for CEMEX, which does include the Dowe Flats Quarry, allows for certain limits on, or requires certain limits on emissions. This includes blasting byproducts, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and carbon monoxide, as well as fugitive particulate matter and fugitive particulate matter of less than 10 microns. And it also specifically calls out the conveyor and crusher point source emissions, and again, source emissions of less than 10 microns. Based on the reporting information available, the operations at Dowe Flats are coming in under those limits each year. So they are, the Dowe Flats work is meeting the requirements of the state permit for emissions. Since there was a great deal of interest in the cement plant, staff did look a little into that, and based on information available from the state's reporting, between 2012 and 2020, the Lions Quarry and cement plant, and again, this is specifically the Lions Quarry and cement plant, produced an average of just over 307,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent a year. That was a fairly average, or that was the average number over those years. Any extension of any continued operation at the Lions Quarry and cement plant would, of course, mean that those emissions continue. Those emissions do have cumulative impacts. You know, once it gets into the system, it is in the system. And that's just the reality of it. The operations there are subject to the GEM 1 requirements. And we do have some staff from Oscar online with any who can answer specific questions related to that. But under the GEM 1 requirements, CEMEX is required to complete an audit of the equipment responsible for the emissions every 5 years, starting this year. Staff's understanding that audit information has been submitted and is in the process of being reviewed by the state. The result of that audit will make recommendations for upgrading the facility related to greenhouse gas emissions. And starting in 2025, the facility must demonstrate emissions control and energy efficiency best practices, plus 5% less greenhouse gas mass emissions than the calculated limit. All of that goes to say that the question before the Planning Commission related to this is the defined closure date for the cement plant sufficient mitigation for the extension of mining at the Dowe Flats site? The Planning Commission also asked for some additional information on the relationship between the two operations, and I'm kind of going through these in order that they were asked, so that's why we're jumping around a little. As stated, the Dowe Flats Quarry and the Lyons Quarry and Cement Plant are separate uses under the Boulder County Land Use Code, and as legal non-conforming uses, the Lyons Quarry and Cement Plant can continue to operate independently of the Dowe Flats Quarry under the Land Use Code. Again, based on questions and intense public interest, county staff did reach out to staff with the state and asked a series of questions related to, well, the relationship between the Lyons Quarry Cement Plant and Dowe Flats. State staff confirmed that the cement plant would not have to close if Dowe Flats closes, but that the Lyons Quarry permit would need to be updated based on the changes. Those changes, if they are limited to the source of materials, would likely be only a technical revision, which does not include any public review or comment. Again, as stated previously, the cement plant operations are included in the mining activities under the state permit for the Lyons Quarry. And once mining activities have ended, e.g. the plant closes, the Lyons Quarry land must be reclaimed. And part of that reclamation plan includes the removal of the buildings. That reclamation must be completed within 5 years of the end of mining activities. So again, with the closure of the plant, the operations at the cement plant are the final mining activity on the Lyons Quarry. This is just a screenshot of some of the letter that we received from the state, and I'm going to, in subsequent slides, go through each of the questions and answers, but just wanted to give you an overall shot of the letter we received. The first question was, if mining operations at Dowe Flats ceased, would the CEMEX cement plant be required to shut down? The answer was very clear. No, the Lyons Quarry permit would not need to be terminated if those mining operations at Dowe Flats ceased. We then asked if mining operations at Dowe Flats ceased and CEMEX continued to operate the cement plant by sourcing materials from elsewhere, would they be required to amend the permit for the Lyons Quarry and cement plant? And the answer to that was yes, it would have to be amended or revised, either through the submission of a technical revision or an amendment application, depending on what the operator proposes. In the answer from the state, they say a proposed change in post-mining use, so the reclamation, if they wanted to, instead of restoring it to pasture land, can continue to use it for industrial, commercial, and leave the plant as final reclamation, would be a significant change and would have to be reviewed through the amendment process, which includes a public comment process. But that a change in source material only for the plant without a change in the post-mine land use, a significant change in the reclamation plan, and or an increase in the affected land could be processed. So if it was essentially, if it was just the change in source of the materials, and these other conditions did not apply. The revision could be done as a technical revision, which is basically a staff level review. The third question we asked was if CEMEX is required to amend the permit for the Lions Quarry and the cement plant because it is bringing in raw materials from someplace other than Dowe Flats. What would that permit amendment process look like? Would it be an administrative? Would there be opportunity for public comment? And just ask a little more detail on what that process might entail. I'm not going to read through all of this, but basically it comes down to the standard amendment process. If it rises to that level, that does include the public comment and notice. If it's a technical revision, there is no public comment and it can be done in fairly short order. We also asked questions specifically related to the relationship between the Lions Quarry and the CEMEX cement plant. So again, the Lions Quarry, not the Dowe Flats, but the Lions Quarry and the cement plant. We asked them to, from the state's perspective, describe the current status of activities at Lions Quarry and whether the land was being actively mined or actively being reclaimed. The statement from the state is excavation has ceased at the Lions Quarry and the cement plant continues to operate. Mining at the site included the excavation of 6 pits. 2 have been reclaimed and released. The other pits have been reclaimed or are in the process of being reclaimed. We also asked when all mining and reclamation activities at the Lions Quarry are complete, will the cement plant be required to shut down, be dismantled, and land reclaimed? The state's response was that operations at the cement plant may continue at the Lions Quarry, even though excavation is complete within the Lions Quarry permit area. When operations at the cement plant terminate, the affected land where the cement plant is located must be reclaimed. The approved post-mining land use for the quarry is pasture land. And when it is no longer in operation, the current reclamation plan requires the operator to shut down, dismantle, and reclaim the cement plant site. So again, once the cement plant closes, it has to be shut down, dismantled, and the land reclaimed in accordance with that reclamation plan for the Lions Quarry site. And finally, we asked how long will CEMEX be permitted to operate the cement plant under their permit, which is again M 1977-208, after all mining and reclamation activities are complete. And the answer was that the currently approved reclamation activities at the Lions Quarry will not be considered complete until the cement plant site is reclaimed to post-mine land use of pasture land. And that reclamation must be completed within 5 years from the date that the operator ceases operations at the cement plant. So that was the information that staff had prepared to in order to answer questions from the board, from the commission. I know there were some additional questions that were directed specifically to the applicant, and staff will defer to the applicant on those questions. The last question that the Planning Commission had for staff was related to why 15 years. Community planning and permitting staff cannot speak to that because we were not involved in those negotiations at all. That's a question that would be better posed to the applicant. And that's it that I've got for the commission at this time.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate the update, especially the clarifications from the state. Do the commissioners have any questions for staff? Oh,
This is Commissioner
actually,
Goldfarb. Oh,
and before you do that, I want to acknowledge that Leishan is here. Commissioner Gargano, can you just state your name and say that you're here for the record?
Commissioner Gargano, and I'm here.
Great, thanks. All right, Ann.
Thank you. Pete, you mentioned that community planning and permitting wasn't involved in the negotiations. Can you remind us who was involved?
It was the Boulder County Parks and Open Space staff.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Bloomfield. Pete, I do have a question. Is there a definition of ceases operations for the plant? Like, is there a way that CEMEX could kind of keep it going, but not really use it, but say that it was still operating for some future use?
Ooh. Under the Boulder County Land Use Code, we would consider operations ceased when it became evident that they were no longer meeting the definition of general industrial and processing of cement. How the state would define ceasing operations, that is not something that I'm able to answer.
Okay. Thank you. And just for an abundance of clarity, the Lions Quarry is, I believe, no longer active and is completely separate from the Dowe Flats Quarry, which is what we're considering today.
Yes and no. The Lions Quarry excavation at the Lions Quarry has ceased.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, under the state permit, the cement plant operations is considered part of the mining activities at the Lions Quarry, so the overall state permit is still active. But again, the state permit for the Lions Quarry and cement plant is separate from the state permit for the Dowe Flats. And likewise, Dowe Flats and the Lions Quarry and cement plant are separate uses under the Boulder County Land Use Code.
Right. Okay. Any other questions for staff? I'm not seeing any.
Commissioner Fitch.
Go ahead.
Pete, I have a question which may be better directed toward the applicant. But that the initial Dowe Flats permit in '94 authorized up to 760,000 tons of material to be excavated per year. Do we have a figure, or do you have a figure on, say, for the per year, how much is being extracted from Dowe Flats, shipped via the conveyor to the cement plant?
I do not have that figure. That probably is better directed to the applicant who operates the the conveyor.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, not hearing any. We will go to the applicant. I'm not sure if Mark is presenting updates or.
The applicants have been promoted, or the applicant team rather. This is Anna Milner staff. Let's just give them one moment.
Okay, while we're taking that moment, I'll ask the applicants to state their name and address for the record when they begin.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Commission. First of all, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for the ability and the opportunity to answer the questions that you've raised for us. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Trpimir Renik. I am the Executive Vice President of Strategic Planning for CEMEX USA. And because Trpimir is a mouthful, you can call me Trip. Everybody else does, so please feel free. With me today are Dre Carlson, She is our Senior Vice President of Sustainability, Communications, and Public Affairs. And Michael Clausen, our Corporate Social Responsibility Specialist here in Boulder County. And Pam Hora, our consultant from Tetra Tech as a senior planner. And our address, the address. So the address is 1010 Katy Freeway, Houston, Texas. And it's our CEMEX corporate headquarters for the US. All right. And if you allow me, I'd like to share my screen and start presentation, please.
Yep, go for it.
Thank you. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
All right, so first of all, I'd just like to, give everybody a kind of a short summary of the request. Or actually, before I start that, you did ask the question whether Mark would be presenting today. Mark and John, who presented at the initial public hearing, they were not able to be present today. So, I hope that I'll be able to fill their role in the right way. As part of my presentation, I'd like to just give an overview of what we are requesting with this extension of the mining permit for down flats. In principle, we're asking for a reduction of the permit area boundaries and a reduction of the mining area per se. So what we're looking at doing for the next 15 years is focusing and concentrating our mining operations on the northeast corner of the revised and reduced permit boundary, as you can see on the graphic on the right-hand side of the slide. So that upper northeast corner is where we will be for the next 15 years, or if the permit is extended, where we would like to focus our mining operations, providing shale for the Lyons cement plant. Now, I'd also like to give you a little bit of insight into how, with the cement production process and our mining activities, how we do our sourcing, and then I'll get into the specific question about answering why the 15 years that was requested for the extension. So every cement plant globally has a number of different raw material requirements in order to meet the chemical and production process requirements to produce a quality product. Okay, so we've highlighted here the four basic components of the raw materials mix that we need for the Lyons cement plant. It includes shale, it includes limestone, the sandstone, and the iron oxide. And it's almost a rule that no cement plant gets all of its raw materials from one source. And that's the case with the Lyons cement plant as well. Currently, we are bringing in limestone from a source that is not Dow Flats. The shale that we require is coming currently from Dow Flats, and we hope that it will come, from Dow Flats in the future. The sandstone and the iron oxide also come from sources that are not Dow Flats or other places. I'd also like to say that in the past, we have used the limestone and the shale as well from sources that were not Dow Flats. So over the course of our past history, currently and going forward, the Lyons cement plant is going to be sourcing its raw materials from a number of different sources at a number of different locations, depending on the process requirements. And the drivers of those process requirements are basically the chemistry that's required within the raw materials. Now, as an operating business, we always want to optimize both economically and from an impact perspective. We want to optimize the use and the sourcing of those raw materials. And that's why in this specific case, the Dow Flats source of shale for the lime cement plant is the optimal use and the lowest impact source for that component of our raw materials. I'd also like to, give you an example just to give you an indication of how extreme sometimes these situations are. There is a cement plant in the United States near Mobile, Alabama. It sources its limestone and its shale type raw materials from a location in Florida that's more than 360 miles away as the crow flies, about 470 miles away by road. And I've used the extreme example, and that's not what we plan to do, but it is just to illustrate that we have a number of different requirements for the production process. It's based on the chemistry of the raw materials and the geology that we encounter in the mining operations that feed the cement plant. We don't always have 100% control on that chemistry because the geology is what it is. And so we always on an ongoing basis need to optimize and find the right types of raw materials. Okay, so I just wanted to give you that insight, as we go into, as I try to respond to the question, why have we asked for a 15-year extension? Now, the first thing that I wanted to say was the Dowe Flats quarry contains valuable mineral reserves for our cement plant operations, and we estimate them to exceed the 15 years that we're requesting. So based on the drilling that we've done, the modeling of the reserves that we have, and the history through the work that we've done at the quarry, we're confident that there are more than 15 years of reserves at the Dowe Flats quarry. Now, our plan is to prioritize what are referred to as the third and fourth ridges, and on the next slide, I'll show you that in a little more detail. But the idea is that because of the chemistry of the material that we can extract from that third and fourth ridge, and because of the preferable depth, which is an economic consideration for us, so the closer to the surface, the better, from an economic perspective, both the third and the fourth ridge are what we are aiming to consume as part of the shale requirement for the Lyons cement plant. Again, based on the drilling that we've done and the modeling that we've done and the data that we have, we estimate that third and fourth ridge, which is kind of the optimal use of the existing raw materials that's in the Dowe Flats area and within the mining area that we've proposed, the volume of material there we estimate will provide us with enough shale to operate for 15 years. Now, when we talk about the 15 years, the question is how much of that shale we actually need. Over the course of the business cycle, over the course of the economic cycle, we estimate that our cement plant is going to require about 700 to 750,000 tons of raw material in total. So from all different sources. Okay. The third and fourth ridges and the shale that will be provided, should the Dowe Flats extension be approved, we expect and estimate to be in the range of 300 to 350,000 tons per year. So that's the volume of shale that we need from the third and fourth ridges. And so based on the estimates that we have of the total volume there, that gives us about 15 years of operation. From our perspective, as a responsible manager of a valuable mineral resource, we do always try and consume the raw materials that are available to us at the existing site where we are currently operating. And so we would rather, in this case, because it's both chemically and economically, and from an impact perspective, the optimal and best source of that shale raw material, we think that operating that quarry for the next 15 years, supplying Lyons cement plant, is the most responsible resource management operation that we can undertake. And what we've also said, and what we're committing to do, is abandoning any remaining reserves after those 15 years, closing the quarry and reclaiming the quarry, as is our requirement. So We know that there are more than 15 years of reserves. We're asking for an extension to operate for another 15 years because it is the most responsible way to manage the resources in that quarry. Now, just to give you a little bit more detail about what that looks like, what you see is on the graphic, the area that's highlighted as the third and the fourth ridge, which is in the northeastern corner of that proposed mining boundary and the proposed mining area, and the western portion, which is the high cal and the second ridge. Now, we are currently performing reclamation activities in that high cal and second ridge area, and so we continue to need to have that within the proposed mining area. But the majority of the activities over the coming 15 years will be within that third and fourth ridge area. Our permit allows us and requires us to have a defined area of disturbance. So the actual area that we can have as an ongoing quarry or an open quarry is limited. And so as we quarry a certain portion and complete the excavation of the raw material there, we then immediately begin reclaiming that part and that geography, let's call it, and we move to the next area. And in that way, we constantly have a limited area of disturbed property on the quarry. And as we consume the raw materials, we then begin the reclamation process in parallel. Now, I'd also like to state, and some of the questions were in some way addressed earlier today. From our perspective, the cement plant operates as a pre-existing legal non-conforming use. We have stated that in the Town of Lyons referral agency comments, and you can see the reference there on the pages C240 to C243. We've also made that same statement during the initial planning commission hearing. And if the county denies our application and CEMEX is no longer able to source that shale material locally from the Dowe Flats quarry, we will continue to operate the plant. If required or as required by DRMS, we will ask for a technical revision of our permit. And what I can tell you is that we've done our homework. We've done the financial and the physical modeling with the sources of raw materials that we currently have available and that we know we will have available going forward. And so the Lyons cement plant will continue to operate because it can, both legally and physically and economically, for the foreseeable future. What we would like to do is do what we think is best, both for the community from an impact perspective and for CEMEX from an economic perspective, and that's to operate Dowe Flats so that we can consume the material that's there in an optimal way, minimize the impact of our operations, and continue to have an economical asset going forward for the committed period of the 15 years. Now, one of the other questions that was raised during the initial hearing was whether or not we would be open to addressing certain public health department issues and mitigation measures. And without going into the details, but what I can state definitely is that both the requirements for improved maintenance practices, the requirements to reduce fugitive dust emissions are certainly issues that CEMEX is committed to improving as we move along with our operations. I can give you one specific example, and it was raised by the Department of Public Health. They mentioned the paving of the East Hall Road. That is a project that we are working on the execution of. It's a project that we've been developing over several years, and we are now at the stage where we are almost ready to start the execution. The Public Health Department mentioned the improved camera surveillance of the plant. We've addressed that issue. And so we are committed to addressing, future mitigation measure and requirements. So as a general conclusion, I'd like to, respectfully request, the planning commission, your recommendation to approve our extension of the mining permit for Dowe Flats with the conditions of approval 1 through 6, 8 through 10, and 12 as written by the planning staff, and some small modifications to conditions 7 and 11 as requested by CEMEX, which we have already submitted. We think that, as I said before, the operation of Dowe Flats and the provision of the shale from that quarry for the Lion cement plant is both for the community and for CEMEX the optimal and a very balanced solution for our raw material requirements. If it happens that the extension of that permit is not approved, we will continue to operate Dowe Flats with the best practices that we always have in our cement plants, and for the foreseeable future. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time today. If you have any questions or comments, we're certainly, myself and our team, are certainly open to try and answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rennick. Any questions for the applicants?
This is Commissioner Fitch. I have a question that I really couldn't find the answer in all the materials that we got. The original Dowe Flats permit allows CEMEX to be taking 760,000 tons of raw material per year. What's the annual projection for how much, if this permit were approved, if the extension were approved, is that the amount of raw materials required to keep the plant running at the current level?
No, the expected level of materials that we would be consuming from Dowe Flats, well, I can give you the 2021 figure. It was approximately 432,000 tons.
Okay.
We expect going forward that the volume will be around somewhere between 400 to 450,000 tons per year.
Okay, so that's the amount from Dowe Flats. And as I understand, based on your presentation, that's the shale that you need. What about the other materials, the limestone, the sandstone, the iron oxide? What does that volume of materials amount to?
So the remaining raw materials, and again, depends on the production level, sir, which will depend on the demand for the cement, that we can sell in the market and that sort of thing. But the expectation is that the total volume, so the difference will be somewhere between 700 to 750,000 tons per year. And that may be a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower, again, depending on the chemistry, the geology, and the economic cycle and requirements for cement.
So one other sort of technical question. In the packet in your application, there's actually a statement that says silica had been trucked from the Lions quarry, 335,000 pounds, 35,000 tons of silica was coming from the Lions quarry that is no longer being excavated. So is silica part of the raw materials for the continuing operation, or is that simply being phased out?
So silica is one of the chemical components that is required for the production of cement. It usually comes in the form of a sand or a sandstone, which is what we have done in the past and what was presented on the slide. That silica can come in other forms. So it will be a continued raw material that we require for the cement plant. I don't know if I've answered your question or not.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions, Sam?
This is Commissioner Goldfarb. I have a question. So you addressed the fugitive dust issue and indicated that you were going to be paving the road. And I noted that the Boulder County Public Health had some other requests in regard to what they would like to see done as improvements that would affect the environment. The things that I noted were the conveyor belt enclosure, solid enclosures, clinker pit improvements, enclosure, broken baghouse detectors, and improving. And you also just improved camera surveillance. Can you speak to those other issues that Public Health Department raised, and what, if anything, you intend to do about those?
So respectfully, I would say that those are mitigation measures that have been requested related to the cement plant, not the Dow Flats permit extension. Having said that, we have taken measures to improve the conveyance systems. We've improved the maintenance, the maintenance that was highlighted by the Public Health Department. And we are committed to ensuring that we perform those mitigation measures that will allow us to operate in good standing in the community.
So does that mean that you would enclose the conveyor belt?
The enclosures of the conveyor belts is a process that we're evaluating now. And if that is required to as a mitigation measure, we will certainly evaluate that. I cannot comment or commit to that at this point, but certainly it is something that we are evaluating.
And would you say that the other issues that I raised are also in that same category of evaluating at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions?
This is Commissioner Whitney. I had a question, but I think it was clarified in your last statement. But you said as part of the Y15 years that Dow Flats provides 300 to 350K tons of shale. That was an annual number then, in order to make, because otherwise the math wasn't working for me, but is that an annual number?
Yes, that's correct. That's an annual number.
Thank you.
Commissioner McMillan, following up on that question, and I'd like to say I appreciate the additional information on your operation. I think it's helpful for our discussion. Do you have an idea of if you're pulling out 350,000 tons of shale a year, or actually I believe you said it was 450, but maybe you could clarify that. How much additional shale is in the ground today? Or is that something you're not sure of?
So our estimates going forward are that we will require somewhere in that range of about 350,000 tons per year of shale. So times the over a 15-year period. So as I said, some years it's going to be a little bit more, some years it'll be less. It'll certainly be a number close to that 15 years times the 350,000. So I don't have.
Yeah, I'm not trying to check your math. I guess what I'm trying to determine is, and I think you answered this earlier, I just want to verify, there is, if you did 350 tons a year, 350,000 tons a year for 15 years, you're saying that there's still going to be material in the ground after that 15 years that hasn't been extracted? Was that?
That's correct. Yeah, so yeah, just doing the rough math, we estimate that there's about 5,000 tons of 5 million tons of the shale in the third and the fourth ridge. Okay, we know that there is additional material within the mining area that could theoretically or potentially be excavated. However, from an economic perspective and from a chemistry perspective, from a process perspective, it's not optimal for us. And so we would prefer to focus on that portion of the raw materials in that northeast corner of the reduced mining area. That makes the most sense from an extraction perspective and from a process perspective.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Bloomfield. We have one question about the emissions control on the plant currently. I saw that you were required to upgrade it in 2013 as part of a violation with the EPA. It's the Clean Air Act. Is that the last time that those emissions controls were updated, or have they been updated more frequently or more recently, I should say?
Let me consult with my colleagues because I don't know the precise answer to that. You have a minute?
Yep.
So those were the last major improvements that were done. We, on an ongoing basis, we maintain that equipment, we upgrade the equipment as required. But to give you a more detailed response, we can do that in due course. We were ready to, respond to questions regarding the Dow Flats application. That specific question, and not fully prepared to respond to. That was part of the NESHAP requirements. And it was something that, was required as part of an overall process to improve our emissions performance. But as I said, on an ongoing basis, we do make sure that we maintain the equipment, improve it as we go along, so that we can operate as a good operator.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
This is Commissioner Goldfarb. I do have some further questions related a bit, Mark, to what you just raised. And I would note that I understand that the Dow Flats operates under a separate permit from the Lions Quarry permit. However, I see this as a business enterprise that is totally interconnected. And I think that the Dow Flats application has been made more connected to the Lions Quarry and cement plant operation by CEMEX's offer to close the plant in 15 years as part of the Dow Flats extension. So I understand that this relates to the cement plant and the Lions Quarry permit, but I'm going to go ahead and ask the questions because, as I say, I see this as all interrelated. And I would ask that, as Commissioner Bloomfield mentioned, that there was an EPA violation and a settlement there in 2013, but I've also noted that there were settlement agreements in 2019, 2020, and 2021 where CEMEX was required to pay penalties. And I'm wondering if you can address those and indicate what, if anything, has been done to mitigate those issues. And also whether, if you could address the state of Colorado violations that have been noted over the years.
So at this point in time, I'm not able to address those. We can do that subsequently, but we were not prepared to address those specific incidences that you have raised.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, I'm not hearing any, so thank you, Mr. Rennick, for your information.
Very welcome. Thank you very much.
Yep. So now there's the question of public testimony. It's basically up to discretion, as I mentioned in the beginning, of the Planning Commission, because we held public testimony at the initial hearing, and that public testimony was closed. It's up to the discretion of the Planning Commission as to whether the new information warrants reopening the public testimony if we've had significant new information. So I'll open it up to discussion amongst the commissioners, and then we'll take a vote one way or the other. Anybody have thoughts?
Commissioner Fitch, I'd be willing to reopen the public comment period, provided if we could do so, requesting that additional public comment address the issues that were raised in the second memo from staff asking for information for this meeting, rather than repeating comments or repeating opposition to the cement plant continuing under any circumstances. We've had a lot of written comments that have come in that we've read, heard, paid attention to. So I'd like to be open to public comment, but I probably can't do another 8-hour, 9-hour meeting like we did on the 17th. So I would ask the public to give us time to actually debate the question and evaluate the application after we hear your comments. But I would encourage you to do it in the most timely fashion that you could.
Thanks, Sam. This is Commissioner Bloomfield. I guess my question is, do we really have new information? It seems like a lot of the information that we've received, this clarification of some of the processes. I'm not really seeing a lot of new information that the public could comment on that we haven't heard, to your point, Sam, that we haven't heard from extensively in the first meeting and in the subsequent written comments. I'm certainly open to someone pointing out something that I've missed there.
This is Commissioner Gargano. I watched the recording. I wasn't there live last time, but it did feel like, just the response type of information that we usually get after public comment, more than, it did not feel like, to your point, Mark, new information to me. So I'm aligned with what you said.
This is Commissioner Whitney. I'm interested in hearing public comment, especially if hopefully some of this information helps clarify to the public. I know last public comment period, we had some kind of confusion in the public comment responses about how Dowe Flats and the plant are linked, and hopefully this information helps clarify that for the public. And so I'm definitely open to hearing more public comment that's more specifically focused on understanding what we're evaluating and understanding kind of the separation, as long as the public comment is kind of restricted to with that understanding and isn't as much focused on the overall operation, but specifically what we're reviewing here today with this docket and keeping in mind the more limited scope. I would be interested in reducing the time period per comment, just because we do have a lot of participants on this call, and I want to make sure that they all have a chance to comment. And the only way we're going to do that is if we restrict the time per commenter a little bit.
You have a proposal on that time restriction?
I was looking at this, Commissioner Rennie. I was looking at the chair for that, but maybe down to a minute or a minute and a half, as opposed to the normal customary 3 minutes.
Anybody else have thoughts?
Yeah, this Commissioner Goldfarb. Yeah, I would agree with you, Mark and Leishan, that we really don't have new information here. And I think that staff did a very good job of clarifying the issue of the separate permits for Dowe Flats and for the Lyons plant and the Lyons quarry permit, which includes the cement plant. So I would be inclined to say, I think we've gotten public comments at the first hearing. What staff noted for us today was that there was overwhelming opposition to this CEMEX application for extension. I think we're aware of that going forward. So I would be fine with just going forward with our discussion and voting at this point.
Commissioner McMillan, I suppose that makes me a tiebreaker. Yeah, I'm fine with public comment. I think in this case, there's really not any additional information that warrants opening it back up. I could be convinced, I suppose, but I'd also like to note for those who are listening and do still want to talk more, that there is an entirely another hearing with the county commissioners on the same subject. So there is still time to talk to a different body. I do feel like we've heard at length until late in the evening from the public on this, and I don't know if there's additional information that would need to be commented on necessarily. So I think I would vote to move forward with our discussion today.
Okay, do we have a motion?
This Commissioner Goldfarb, I would move that we forego public comment at this hearing.
Second.
So this is Commissioner Fitch. I thought the written comments provided significant additional information regarding the public health impacts of the combined operation, part of which is Dowe Flats, part of which is the plant itself. Staff provided us with additional emissions per year, including the CO2 emissions. I think we need significantly more discussion of that, of the public health question, because it is part of the application for Dowe Flats is that eventually shutting down the plant after 15 years offers mitigation for the 15 years of emissions that will take place if the application is approved. So I don't know whether that public health discussion will come through public testimony about those health effects. I know a number of people spent a lot of time researching that. I'd like to hear, I think there was going to be somebody from the Boulder County Public Health Department to speak to that. In part, I'd like to know of the public health effects that have been noted, how much of that is really attributable to Dowe Flats and how much of it is attributable really to the operations of the cement plant itself. So again, I'm not sure how to get that information into our discussion, but I think that's a pretty key part of what's at stake here.
Thanks, Sam. I guess my question there would be, do we have someone from the Boulder County Health Department that could comment on that? It doesn't seem like that would come through public comment.
This is Commissioner Goldfarb. And I think that, Sam, we've been provided with information in public comment in regard to those issues. So I think that we can go ahead and discuss that since we have that information.
So we do have a motion. We do not have a second.
No, we did. I thought I heard a second.
No,
No.
did we? I did not hear the second.
Oh, maybe. Sorry, I misunderstood. Apologies. Okay, I will second. This is Commissioner Gargano.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We will do a roll call vote. Mark Bloomfield, and so just to be clear, we're voting to not reopen public comment. Mark Bloomfield, aye. Sam Fitch.
Nay.
Ann Goldfarb,
Aye.
Gavin McMillan,
Aye.
Chris Whitney,
Aye.
and Leishan Gargano.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-1.
This is Commissioner Whitney. If I may interject with a comment, I'll second what Commissioner McMillan said and remind the public that the Board of County Commissioners will also be hearing this docket after we're done with our either recommendation or not recommendation to the Boulder County Commissioners. And so additional public comment is available then.
Yes, thank you. That's an important piece. Okay, so we can go into discussion. I'm happy to kick it off unless somebody else. So this is Commissioner Bloomfield. You know, I obviously this is super complicated. And I think for me, one way of simplifying it is, regardless of whether we approve this or not, the plant will be operating for at least 15 years. And for me, that's way too long. And it's putting way too much carbon dioxide into the air as well as other pollutants. But what our decision here is not going to actually impact that because we don't have control over that piece. I'm not an expert on state law, so if anyone knows the answer to this, feel free to jump in. But it seems to me like with the GEM audit process, you know, the state does have the requirement that emissions be reduced by 5%. To me, that tells me that the state does have jurisdiction, at least somewhat, over the emissions. And that would actually be the path for activists who really care about these CO2 emissions. I include myself in that. To really, that would be the path to reduce the CO2 emissions over 15 years. So to me, if I then take that out of the question is, does continued operation of Dowe Flats, which is really the question that we're up against here. What are the impacts of us voting to recommend approval or recommend denial? And to me, it kind of comes down to, first of all, I look at not comparing to what's happening today, because if we continued and the permit were to expire, then the land would be reclaimed and there wouldn't be mining there. So really, the baseline for me is reclaimed land and no mining. From there, it's a question of, are the impacts of the mine worse than, and my rough calculations was that we would double the truck traffic to bring in the materials needed to operate the plant. When I look at CEMEX's map, they have plants in California and southern Texas and east of the Mississippi. And then there's a big empty spot in the middle of the country with Lime, Colorado as the only plant in the area. So to me, that suggests that they might have motivation keeping the plant open. So to me, it kind of comes down to, are the impacts of keeping the plant open, or excuse me, keeping the mine open, the environmental impacts of the mine itself versus the impacts of traffic and dangerous traffic of trucks, emissions from those trucks, etc. I'll also say that, in none of the opposition did I see any proposals to reduce the amount of cement that we use, and nor did I see any proposals for, sourcing it from a more sustainable place. So there's also the question of, like, are we just pushing this issue off onto another municipality that maybe has fewer activists in their community? I'll start that as an opening gambit. I certainly don't feel like I'm decided on the matter, but that's kind of my current thoughts, and I'd love to hear other commissioners' points of view.
This is Commissioner Gargano. Yeah, some of the stuff that you said, Mark, just to kind of, in my own words, if we deny this, we are not denying the continued emissions, right? We're not denying the cement factory, because that's not on the table for us. It's not an option for us, right? Whether we want it, right? Clearly that's what the public wants. Unfortunately, that's not a choice that this group gets to make. So that puts us in a place where we have to make a decision that we probably won't be either way, right? No matter what we decide, we're not going to get everything we want, right? It's rocking a hard place for us. What I do like about this proposal is that it does give us, right, a commitment of record for a date for them to stop that otherwise does not exist. Right? If we deny this, we are handing that back across the table for however long they want to operate forever. That's to my understanding. Which doesn't feel like something that serves our community well. And to your point, Mark, not only will we be doing that, but we'd be doing it with increased truck traffic. Yeah, which again, doesn't feel good. So that's where my head's at.
So Commissioner Fitch, I think that another alternative, and it is to recommend to the county commissioners that they extend the existing Dow Flats permit for 2 years probably, in order to give the county itself time to evaluate more fully the public health consequences and environmental consequences of extending for 15 years as opposed to proposals for a shorter time period. I think there's a question that's been posed in some of the comments about whether, if Dow Flats is only able to provide a portion, or say we turn down this proposal, that CEMEX has said they would continue operations by trucking in. The number of trucks that would be required to haul in 750,000 tons of raw materials to keep the current cement plant operating at its current level is an enormous expansion of the traffic impacts. I think it would make the existing cement plant lose its legal non-conforming operation. It would be an enormous expansion from either the initial permit, which drew its raw materials from the Lions Quarry, or the last 30 years in which they've basically drawn a substantial portion of their raw materials from Dow Flats. If they're going to imported sources for all of their raw materials, that has very large implications. And again, it seems to me, again, you've got to start multiplying out the CO2 emissions per year, multiplying out particularly the particulate emissions which come from the mining, not just from the cement factory. So it seems to me, again, that the commissioners would be wise to simply extend the existing permit while they actually look at a comparison, which we were not given, is really what are the effects, environmental and public health, of 15 more years of operation like is currently there. Is there an alternative that would say 10 years of operation or a dozen years of operation? Or would we say basically this is an operation which was fine when Boulder County Lions were much smaller, a very different community in that part of the county when this was initially started. So again, the alternative, since we don't decide this question to approve or not to approve, but our decision is really to recommend that the commissioners do something, then we could also recommend that they take additional time before they make the decision to commit to another 15 years of mining at this operation.
But this is Commissioner Gargano, the voluntary commitment of record, right, to cease operations in 2037 is attached to the 15 years. So it does require, that would then require a renegotiation with this group. Right. So is that not true? You don't think that's true?
I think so. Again, it's not clear to me. There is a commitment of record. I think the land would transfer whether the cement plant would be closed down. That's in whether, for example, the general industrial zoning goes away. Again, I think part of the issue is we need to get a full special use review of the operation, and we don't have the capacity to do that except voluntarily on the basis of what CEMEX is willing to have discussed or not.
When you say a special use review of the operation, do you mean the cement plant or the quarry?
Oh, the whole thing. Again, the separation question, which staff has addressed for us, we just addressed in executive session, I think is a linchpin, which segments, we can talk about some things, we can only talk about things basically that are offered as mitigation for open space. Again, whether they would mitigate some of the conditions at the plant, they can agree to talk about that or not. It seems to me this is not really a full evaluation of the actual operation. We're evaluating one piece of it, and whether that makes sense in land use terms, I don't think so. So look back to condition 10 regarding I'm lost in my paper, so I will go look, try to find that and not hold up the discussion.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Any other commissioners have thoughts?
Commissioner Whitney, first of all, I want to just kind of take a second to thank all of the hard work I know that Boulder County Parks and Open Space and Planning has done to get us this docket. And so they've certainly done a lot of hard work and thinking about this to even in negotiation to even get us to kind of this stage where we're at today. But I mean, personally, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this over the last since the last meeting and even before the last meeting, and it's definitely tough because as Commissioner Gargano said, it's almost that we're not in the right, we're not the right forum for this, in the sense that certainly what we're overwhelmingly hearing from the public is that they would like to close the cement plant, but that's not what we're considering. We're considering the Dowe Flats special use review with this attached commitment agreement that CEMEX has provided, where they would close the plant in 15 years if this was approved, that they could continue using Dowe Flats for 15 years. And I think it's really that hard work of all staff that has gotten us even that commitment, right? And so, but what I struggle with in my head is we have this special review criteria that's number 11, which is establish an appropriate balance between current and future economic, environmental, and societal needs. And the really hard part there is always the future one, right? Because I think certainly if this proposal came to us and it was, you know, in 2 years of continued operation at Dowe Flats, we would also have a commitment to close the cement plant at Lyons quarry. Then I think, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking for everyone, but I think that there's some amount of time here where we're all like, yeah, that seems like a good deal. But then as it kind of gets out to 15 years, and then I feel like based on what happened in some of the past, in the past meeting, it starts to become tough to establish whether or not that balance is there 15 years from now, whether, you know, in year 12 or 13, it still was a good deal that the Dowe Flats quarry is operating. And certainly for a community that thought that this year was just going to be the end of the Dowe Flats permit, that's that's kind of tough to then have to say to them that there's 15 more years of coring, even just for the coring at that site directly. And so for me, that's kind of where I'm struggling at, in the sense that it's a really great opportunity that we have this deal that Parks and Open Space has been able to negotiate, but it's also tough to figure out whether that meets the special review criteria 11 of getting the right balance going forward in the future. And certainly, as we're hearing from the community, right, there's a lot of, maybe not even at Dow Flat specifically, but the whole concept of the Lions and Dow Flat site, there's a lot of community activism against. And so predicting whether that balance will be correct 15 years out, I think it's a really tough question for this group to have to answer.
This is Commissioner Goldfarb. I'm struggling with the same issues I think that everyone else is. And look at that 15-year period as an awfully long time. And trying to look at whether or not, as you say, this is a good deal for the county. Part of my problem in making that decision is the fact that CEMEX is here today asking for an extension. And my concern is that in 15 years, we could be in the same boat, where CEMEX is coming back and saying, we want more time. Because initially, as I understand it, in these negotiations, they were in fact asking for more than 15 years. I think they may have asked at one point for 25 years. And I have a hard time looking at this and feeling absolutely confident that they won't be coming back and asking for more time. I also have concerns about the public health issues and what they are willing to do in terms of the kinds of requests that Boulder County Public Health has made that would be in the interest of the residents who live near the site, the residents of Boulder County, the state of Colorado. Environmentally, I feel like they're saying some of the right things, but are not willing to necessarily commit to some of the things that I think are really important protections, particularly if you're looking at 15 years going forward. And I understand that we're looking at the Dow Flats permit, but as I said earlier, I just don't see how this can be separated, especially since closure of the cement plant has been injected into the negotiation.
Thanks, Ann. This is Commissioner Bloomfield. So your first point, Ann, I think the simple thing, and I could be wrong about this, is they could come back in 15 years and ask for an extension, except that in 15 years, they won't have anything that the county wants, namely the closure of the cement. So it seems to me like they come back in 15 years and say, hey, we want to extend it. And we just say, no, we want to stick with the original plan, which is to close the cement plant and mitigate all of the quarried areas. Right now, if the cement plant weren't there, my guess, I don't know, but my guess is we would have voted pretty quickly to not renew the permit. And so really the question is, do we renew the permit so that we can get the cement plant guaranteed closed? Or do we not, and then potentially it is open for a lot longer than and again, to me, it seems like 15 years is way too long for that plant to be in operation at the current levels of emissions, and that we really need to seek other avenues to reduce those emissions long before 15 years from now. And to me, it seems like the only avenues for that are state and federal laws. As far as the other, recommendations from the Boulder County Health Department, I agree that I feel like CEMEX has been I'm not comfortable with their level of commitment in terms of what they're willing to do versus what they say they will actually do. So I definitely agree with you.
This is Commissioner Goldfarb again. Let me just make one other point, and I'll let other people then make their points. But I want to, before we get too far removed from what Sam said in regard to trucking in all materials to the cement factory, if in fact the Dowe Flats quarry were closed. I'm concerned too, Sam, about whether or not that would change the nature and the extent of the operation enough that it takes it outside of that non-conforming use exception that exists. And I'm wondering if there's any way to, at some point, get an advisory opinion, a legal opinion on this, because I think that's another really important point going forward as to what my feeling is about this whole application. I guess that's a question.
Yeah.
It's a comment, but it's a question too.
So I would love to hear from county attorneys that are present. I'll also say though that what staff presented as response from the state was that a change in the source of materials would be what sounded to me like an administrative review without public comment. So that to me suggests that, it seems to me like to get a change in non-conforming use, they'd have to substantially change the facility, which they're not doing if they change the source. They're just changing whether it comes across a conveyor belt or it comes on a truck. That is my completely non-legal expertise opinion. So I'll couch that there, but I'd love to hear if the assistant attorney who I see her video is on. So.
Hi, thank you. This is Liana James, Assistant County Attorney. We would be happy to discuss that topic. In order to do that, I would recommend that we make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-4024B, if you would like to discuss that topic further with the advice of your attorneys.
This is Commissioner Goldfarb. I would make that motion.
Is that enough for me? I can second that. Mark, you're on mute.
You, Commissioner Bloomfield, aye. This is a roll call vote, by the way. Commissioner Gargano.
Aye.
Commissioner McMillan.
Aye.
Commissioner Whitney.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldfarb.
Aye.
And Commissioner.
Aye.
Okay, so we have unanimous vote to go into executive session.
And this is Liana James, Assistant County Attorney again. I can work to put together a Teams invite for us to do that. I don't know if Anna, you might be able to do it faster than me. Oh, she actually, I think she just sent it out. So she definitely beat me to it. Thank you, Anna. I'll see everyone over there.
Okay.
And just a reminder to the planning commissioners and all attending to please mute and stop your video. We will still remain streaming.
And we're coming back out of executive session.
Thank you, Commissioner Bloomfield.
Gotta find the windows and the buttons.
We're waiting on Ann and Sam.
I think Anna's still in. She just has to find her camera.
We'll do a roll call.
Okay.
We'll start. And if you're back, we can't hear you or see you. Did we just lose Ann?
This is Anna Milner staff. It does appear that Commissioner Goldfarb has exited the Zoom hearing, so if we can give her a moment to return.
Shower. I see the applicant is back. Thank you for that. Okay. So we'll go ahead and do a roll call just to start the meeting again. Mark Dinfield here, Chris Whitney.
Here.
Gavin McMillan,
Here.
Nishan Gargano,
Here.
Sam Fitch,
Here.
and Goldfarb.
Here.
Okay. So continued discussion. Thanks to everyone for their patience while we're in executive session. To the public for sticking it in with us. Who has some thoughts?
This is Commissioner McMillan. I haven't spoken yet, so I'll chime in here, and I don't want to rehash the other commissioner statements. This is a really difficult one to tackle. You know, closing the cement plant is not what we're being asked to issue an opinion on today, but I think that's the primary area of everyone's concern. But at the same time, it's part of the commitment of record is closing the plant, and in fact, like the only guarantee that we have that it will close in the future is through approval of this land use application. That's the only guarantee. There might be other avenues, but this is the only one that's a guarantee. So, my concern is that if we deny this application, or if the county commissioners deny this application, that we're going to prolong the operation of the mine and the cement plant and really exacerbate the impacts through truck traffic and greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that is what I'm hearing from everyone else as well. It's kind of like where we're all sort of focused on. And so, all that said, I'm focused on the application in front of us, which is the continuation of mining at Dowe Flats. And my primary objection to that application is with the duration of the requested extension, similar to what other commissioners have said. I'm actually all for the responsible extraction of the material on the ground. I appreciate the additional information that indicates there's plenty of material there, really. And, cement gets used in our county, and this is having the production next to the mining is actually probably more environmentally responsible than having it a long way away. So, I am for that responsible extraction. I just don't think that 15 more years of it necessarily meet condition of approval number 2. And that condition says that the use is compatible with the surrounding area. I think 25 years ago, this use was probably compatible with the surrounding area. Lyons was a lot less developed than it is now, and things have just changed in that area to where, I think if a mining operation came to us now and said, hey, we want to set up on the outside of Lyons, I don't think we'd be having this long of a discussion about it. So I think 15 more years after 25 years of operation, that's 60% more time than was originally requested. I think some amount of time less than that, I could probably support. I don't know how we arrive at that number. I think it's the challenge that I have, and nor do I know even if it would be accepted by those who are going to ultimately make the decision. But I think I would lean towards making a recommendation. I should say, lean towards making a recommendation that would reduce the amount of time that it was allowed to continue to operate, and get the closure that everyone wants on this issue. And that's where my head is right now, and all the specifics and details of what that sounds and looks like in a motion, I'm not sure of, but that's kind of where I'm landing. Thanks.
Thanks, Gavin. Commissioner Whitney.
Yeah, Commissioner Whitney. I also just wanted to a little bit expanding on what Commissioner McMillan just said, but also a point I didn't really see expressed in public comment, and I just want to make sure it's represented because it's also members of our community that be impacted by this. The other day I was watching a foundation being poured in my neighborhood, and it really reminded me of the fact that we have over 1,000 structures to rebuild that were impacted by the Marshall Fire. And just looking at where, if we had to pick today a place where we would most encourage a special use review to open up a mining operation to get the raw materials to build those foundations for those Marshall Fire structures, I think it would be clear that Dowe Flats would be an ideal site in the fact that there's already established mining operation and that it's local to the county and all of those factors. So it's also, I feel like that in terms of thinking about how we balance the current economic, environmental, and societal needs of mining for limestone and shale in Boulder County, it does fit a lot of the current needs. I think what I'm struggling with, and I said this before, is whether or not 15 years is really something that we can consider in terms of balancing the future needs of our community.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitney. I hadn't thought about those 1,000 homes. That's an excellent point. Commissioner McMillan, to your point, I guess I see it as we have a motion in front of us to approve or to recommend approval or to recommend denial. I think we can say, we recommend denial, but we would like to see a 7-year extension or something along those lines. But I do think, and someone correct me if I'm wrong here, is like we're basically recommending to approve or recommending to deny. And I think, you know, if we said we're recommending to approve with an additional requirement that they have a brown fence instead of a gray fence, that would be one thing. But if we're recommending, you know, we're changing the condition that it be 7 years instead of 15 years, that's way too big for me. So that's kind of, I guess I would say, if we wanted to go down that road, then it would be a denial and a recommendation for a renegotiation. But I do think that there's a significant chance that if we said 7 years, then we would lose the condition of closing the cement plant.
This is Commissioner Gargano. I agree. Like, for me, this is the whole, like, we have a closing date. It's not a date we like, but it's there. It's in front of us. The risk of letting that go is very high because it leaves out the opportunity for this plant to operate indefinitely. That is a big risk to take, and that's what I'm struggling with.
This is Commissioner Goldfarb. I thought that the question that we're all struggling with was well put in the staff report. That is the commitment to close the plant sufficient mitigation for impacts of extending the mining? I think that's a very succinct way of looking at this. And I would agree with Commissioner McMillan that I feel like 15 years is too long. I understand saying, you know, coming up with another number or just saying we think it's too long is difficult, but asking the question, you know, 15 years, is that sufficient mitigation for? I just can't go with the 15 years. It's just too long. So I guess if we're looking at an up or down vote on that, and I understand the issue of it's a date certain, that whole piece of it, but I just can't go with that. Not right now.
So, and given that saying no to that means a potential of operating indefinitely, how does that, like, what does that mean to you?
What it means to me is that I've in my mind thought about a lot of different scenarios of how the future could go. And I'm thinking that I'd rather look at those possibilities than going for 15 years with this mining operation continuing, particularly with the way the area has changed around the mine. As Commissioner McMillan said, you know, if we were looking at this now, I don't think we'd think twice about saying, is this okay? It's not. And I can't get past that.
Commissioner Bloomfield. I mean, I agree that 15 years is too long. I'll counter with, you know, it's not just the impacts of the mine versus the indefinite operation of the plant. It's also a doubling of the truck traffic and all the emissions that comes with that, and all of the so really, to me, it's a delta between you know, whatever the impact of the mine is and subtracting off additional truck traffic. Like, that's really the delta that we're looking at. And keep in mind that when we have a 15-year definite end to that cement plant, we also have a definite end to the truck traffic. And if that cement plant operates indefinitely, we also have the truck traffic indefinitely. So anyone?
You know, maybe just as a suggestion here, food for thought. I mean, there is the application in front of us and a question that's pretty clear of yay or nay, of the terms that are directed. And then, you know, there's another track where we say, you know, it could meet the criteria for approval if ABC are true. And then we could recommend, you know, approval, but you know, we can't do that today because it's not the application in front of us. So I think it's more of a matter of, you know, I would really like to convey the information to the Board of County Commissioners of what our struggle is and maybe what we think could be acceptable if it were to come back to us. You know, like if this was slightly different, and that I'll just throw out 7 years. If it was a 7-year commitment, that 2030 is a big date for our climate goals, I believe, as an example. There's some rational nexus to that to me. You know, I think I would be able to get there if that was the proposal. It's not the proposal in front of us, but I think I could if it was. I'm just struggling with the 15 years. So how we convey to the county commissioners, if we are to deny this application as it stands, what we think would be appropriate is important to me. That comes out of our motion today. So that was a lot. I don't know how you craft that, but that's what I'm thinking right now.
This is Commissioner Goldfarb. I think we've in the past taken a vote on something and also added that sort of information to it, to our recommendation, because it's a recommendation that we could convey that information.
And I've had discussions with staff that we could deny and say, this is what our recommendation actually is. And obviously it would require renegotiation.
You know, maybe the question without putting a motion on the table is it, you know, are there folks on this board right now who would recommend approval of, you know, the recommended language from staff? You know, and if someone wants to put that motion forward, you know, and we can get a second, I think it would be worth discussing it and seeing, you know, where we get to on a vote. But I'm not ready to make that motion. But I want to throw it out to anyone who may be leaning that way as a commissioner today.
If anyone's willing to move to approve as presented to us, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah.
And maybe that's a discussion before a motion, but I'll throw it out there to everyone.
When I look at the trade-offs, Commissioner Bloomfield, when I look at the trade-offs, especially throwing in the 1,000 homes that need to be built up, rebuilt, and the guarantee of closing the plant, essentially the guarantee of reduced truck traffic as a trade-off for impacts of mining. I don't know. I'm awfully tempted to recommend approval. I'm not sure that I'm 100% there yet, because I agree 15 years is too long. And again, the 15-year time frame doesn't have any impact on the cement plant as far as I'm concerned, because we need to reduce the emissions of the cement plant way before 15 years, and that's not something that we're going to be able to do.
This is Commissioner Goldfarb again. I would just say that I know it's going to take a long time to rebuild those Marshall fire homes. Believe me, I live right in the middle of it. It's not going to take 15 years to do it, though.
Agreed.
So I want to be sensitive, obviously, to fire victims, but it's not going to be 15 years.
Agreed. And there's also the question of, again, our responsibility. You know, one of the things that has me lean towards approval is, as I said in the first meeting, you know, when we're talking about extracting these materials, doing it from a place that's already extracting, and we're just extracting more. We're not expanding the footprint. We're just going deeper. As far as responsible extraction, that's pretty compelling. And I understand the impacts to the surrounding area. And if we close it down and we don't have something that goes hand in hand to reduce the amount of cement that we're consuming, then all we're doing is pushing it off on another municipality.
This is Commissioner Goldfarb again. I would agree with you on that. And I would feel a whole lot better about this if there were more of a commitment by CEMEX to go along with the provisions that public health has requested going forward. And again, I know that's not part of this submission, but my focus, a lot of my focus is on the public health effects of what's going on there and what CEMEX is willing or not willing to do. And going forward with a mining operation, excuse me, that is detrimental to the environment and is detrimental to the people living nearby is just such a big concern for me.
I agree with that.
I know that doesn't get us any closer to.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is Commissioner Gargano, right? And I agree with you, but I'm struggling with the whole right bird in the hand. We don't
Right.
like it. We don't like it, but at least we know it will be over someday. We have a date. It would be over.
I still can't get there.
It's such a risk. It's such a huge risk.
I can't.
I mean, there has to be a recommendation we can make.
Yep.
For exploring a shorter time period while also not throwing away the opportunity to have a set date for this to end.
There has to be.
I mean,
so
I
what?
want there to be.
We want there to be, yes.
I really want there to be.
This is Commissioner Goldfarb again. I don't know how you do that. I mean, I think what you're saying is, okay, let's approve the 15-year extension, but y'all go back and talk and come up with a shorter time frame. That's not going to happen. Because if we approve 15 years, they'll go with the 15 years,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
So then we need, oh, go ahead.
Commissioner Fitch. So it seems to me again that we sort of end up saying that the smartest thing that we can do is to say we can send the whole discussion record to the Board of County Commissioners. They'll see all the backing and forthing that we've been doing. But I think, again, the question is either to recommend denial of the application as written with the conditions as proposed by staff, or as it is to say, these are really intractable questions that we're being asked to make between public health concerns, commitments of record to close the cement plant at date certain, and benefits to open space of Boulder County. So again, the alternative is to recommend to the county commissioners that they grant a 2-year extension, 1-year extension to consider other deals, including shorter timeframes, conditions of approval that would incorporate more of what the Public Health Department recommended in the original packet. There would be time to consider those kinds of questions and to explore what the trade-off is. But I don't think we have a very good, very clear notion of what the trade-offs are. We know what open space gains. We know what the county gains in terms of a 15-year deadline for the terminating the plant. But again, how do we know what the consequences are of 15 more years of very high levels of CO2 emissions, lower levels, but 15 years worth of emissions of small particulates? All of those things are, to me, just reason that we need more time, including more time for town of Lyons, town of Longmont, to be involved in these discussions. I don't feel comfortable approving an agreement that was basically negotiating between part of the county and CEMEX. Seems to me has to be a much wider discussion of that. And maybe that'll happen at the Board of County Commissioners. Maybe they're smarter than I am about how to deal with the issues before the county.
Commissioner Rennie, I think my concern with that is you're just extending the current situation 2 years without effectively starting the clock on this new special use review permit. So I'd rather have all of the years be counting than extra years, assuming in 2 years we just come back with the same situation, right? Like, I'd rather start the timer this year than in the future.
Yeah, and this is Commissioner Gargano. We all want a better option to exist, but we keep saying that and not saying out loud that there are options that exist that go longer than 15 years. Right? We say that as if denying this guarantees 15 or less, but it does not. There are scenarios where denying this leads to longer than 15 years. That is a major risk. I understand it's a risk we don't like, and it's a risk we might be willing to take because we think our odds are good of them being able to come up with less than 15 years. But I don't want us to, out of hope and desire, ignore that it is a very real possibility that it would then run for longer than 15 years.
Right. Yeah, I keep coming back to, that decision, which is a extremely difficult one, Alicia, and I think you put it really well. And that it's almost a political decision. I'm sort of focused on the land use question, because that decision involves different departments, open space benefits, which we're not necessarily considering. It's much bigger than this, it's a big question, but a smaller land use question in front of us, which is related to mining. And so, kind of where I come back to is we are, making a recommendation. So I just, whatever recommendation we make, and it may be split on this board, I don't know the vote on whatever the recommendation is that I think it's just important that we convey, which we already have, what our struggle with the question is, and perhaps an alternate that could be supportable. So that the folks, the county commissioners can then take that input from us, a recommending body, and make the decision as elected officials. And I think that's our role. And it's none of us take it lightly. We've been here for, 12 hours now between 2 different meetings. So I really appreciate everyone's input. And I'm getting to a point where I think for me, I could perhaps make a motion to say, and I would say this in a positive light, like we could approve this. I would recommend to approve it if the duration of time was, I'll throw out 7 years, and all the other details of this arrangement were the same. I think I could personally get there if that were the case. So we're basically saying, you know, we're denying, I guess I would cage it or couch it as we're denying the existing application if it were
recommending.
Sorry, we're recommending denial of the existing application if it did look different with a 7-year term that we could recommend it if we all voted to approve. So that's kind of how I feel like I want to present that recommendation. I don't know how that sits with all of you, but.
So, Ms. Commissioner Bloomfield, I'd like to play that scenario out. You know, I think it's wishful thinking to say that we would get 7 years and closure of the plant in 15 years. And so let's just say we got 7 years, but not closing of the plant. So the plant still goes on indefinitely. And we have operation of the mine for 7 years. And then we have increased truck traffic after that for indefinitely. Is that any better than just denying it and just shutting down the mine?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say in some sense, yes, because we're talking about responsible extraction of materials and production of cement, you know, immediately adjacent to that extraction. But I'm not sure that's enough to get me there.
Yeah, it's a nuance that I hadn't fully grasped. Thanks for bringing that up, Mark. I mean, I would think, you know, ideally they both close in 7 years. And
yeah,
this is where it's hard because like we're not a party to this negotiation.
Yeah,
you know, we're so I don't know if that would work for either party or the county commissioners, but I think if it was that, I think I'd be voting for approval today.
If it were 7 years for both.
7 on 7, yeah. It would be.
Sure.
So, but that's not the application in front of us. So maybe that is just this conversation that we've had is perhaps enough for the county commissioners and staff to summarize, you know, kind of the stuff that we discussed, and we don't need to get into the specifics of what we would approve because I think
right.
we'll talk about it until 12 o'clock again. So
yeah.
Are we meeting our role though? I mean, yeah. Hey, it was too hard. Go listen to some talk and see what you think.
You're right.
This is Commissioner
yeah.
Goldfarb. I think that we are meeting our duty. I think that we've, as Commissioner McMillan just said, we've spent a lot of time. It's obvious everybody's done their homework on this and has thought deeply about it. And we're all very conflicted about what to do. And I think part of the reason for that is I feel like, and I think Commissioner Fitch has raised this, is that there are so many what ifs in this, and there's just too much that's unknown. And it feels like a result was reached in the negotiation without full consideration of so many different factors. And we're left with all those factors, and that's where the what if comes in. And it just feels like we're not, based on the fact that we've been here for, 12 hours or whatever it is, that we're not in a position, clearly we don't feel comfortable making this decision, that there's information we need, there's more negotiation that needs to be done before this can comfortably be approved as is, or in any form. There's just more that needs to be done, I think.
Well, I would counter that. I mean, I definitely hear what you're saying. Again, we don't know what the county attorney and the negotiations were between the attorneys and the Board of Open Space, or the Open Space Department and CEMEX. I would hazard a guess that they got the best deal that they felt like they could get. And so to say that there needs to be more negotiations done, I don't see that actually. I mean, I see us giving up something, a big chunk of something, and it seems like that would be closure of a plant in 15 years. I mean, that's obviously conjecture, but so is saying that there were things that weren't considered in the negotiation and that we could go back and get a negotiation that was more to our liking. I feel like the county attorneys are in alignment with our goals and the public's goals. And I feel like they got the best deal that they could get. Because as Commissioner Gargano has said lots of times, yeah, we don't like a lot of this stuff, but we're limited as to what we can do.
Commissioner Whitney, I think one of the things I've been thinking about is if we look at why this is often more complicated than other land use questions, it's because there are these other factors that involve, you know, other county departments and kind of the overall situation of other stuff going on in the county than just this one individual land use special review. And so I think one of the things that I think about, maybe is not the right way to think about it, maybe it is, but is if we just looked at the Dow Flats, if what the Board of County Commissioners was tasking us to do is just look at only the Dow Flats land use question and ignore everything else on the table, would we be comfortable with approving, ignoring every other, you know, factor that's going on here and just looking at a special site review for additional 15 years of mining on Dow Flats? What would Planning Commission's recommendation be? And then maybe that's kind of punting on leaving some of the other questions open to the Board of County Commissioners, but I feel like if we take our role as Planning Commission to be just about answering specifically the land use question for that specific plot, and leave the purpose of Board of County Commissioners is that they have a larger view of other factors going on in the community and everything else that's going on. But if we looked at our task just as evaluating that, like I'm curious if we would have a different answer or an easier answer.
Commissioner Bloomfield, yeah, I think it would be a heck of a lot easier because I think it would be pretty clear.
Yeah.
And I can get to, I think the thing for me is it's still not in a vacuum, because I still have to say, okay, if we deny this, we recommend denial, then what happens? And I can't not ask the then what happens question. And to me, what happens is, for starters, tons of more truck traffic. And
This is
then-
Commissioner Gargano. We've talked about truck traffic in other parts of the county that is very dangerous too. I mean, we can't ignore additional truck traffic isn't just noisy and bad for our roads and expensive. It's dangerous for the human beings that are, instead of, right, that those trucks are driving near and around.
And it has impacts on the people that are all around that plant, just like the mine would. Now, to Sam's question, I think it's a good one. Do we have a full understanding of what are the health impacts of option A versus option B? I don't think we do.
Commissioner Fitch again. My answer is we do not have a clear evaluation of that. We do not have detailed discussion of that, in part because the way of the particular way in this case, the mine is separated from what happens to what the mine raw materials are used for right across the street. So again, I think I think there are lots of uncertainties about what the future is. 15 years is a long time. Think back to what that part of the county was like in 1993 or 1994, and what it looks like now. Think about how many cars go down 66 now as opposed to 1993. There are inherent uncertainties in this, but it seems to me that there are a wider set of considerations and the risk, on the one hand, is we lose the CEMEX commitment to close the plant in 2037. On the other hand, there are very few guarantees that that will actually happen. I would recommend to the county commissioners, they work hard with the county legal staff to figure out how to lock that up. I'm struck that there's not a reclamation bond that guarantees that the money's going to be there, rather than CEMEX or some successor owner going bankrupt the year in which they're supposed to be starting the reclamation. I think I think the reclamation of that site is a huge project. And the question, again, trying to get certainty about certain kinds of things, but certainty about the overall outcomes is very hard, where in the comp plan, we are committed to a very wide range of considerations about health, safety, and welfare, about the compatibility with the neighborhood, about trade-offs between economic gains or economic losses. It's very difficult to, again, integrate all those things or to have real certainty. So again, I think that the narrowest decision is a straight decision that says the proposal as made, the application and commitments of record, yes or no. That's our recommendation. That's not what it's not going to block, not going to make the decision for the county commissioners. It's just our best recommendation, given all the complexities that we've been going round and round about.
This is Commissioner Gargano. Is our recommendation then that they seek additional information on the comparable impacts?
Yes.
And that they hold their decision until they have that information?
I would definitely support that.
And then
Goldfarb, I would say, I would agree with Commissioner Fitch and say, I would divide this into a two-part kind of vote / discussion, and that is vote on the proposal as presented. And then depending on what the vote on that is, relay to the commissioners the concerns that we have. And we've done that before, where we've simply talked specifically about our concerns.
anyone else have some thoughts?
This is Commissioner Whitney. Should we just get started if anyone has a motion for the first half of that?
This is Commissioner Goldfarb. I will make a motion, and I don't have the specific language in front of me here as far as the recommendation from staff, but I would recommend that we deny the application in front of us pursuant to SU 2022-003 as presented in the staff report and recommendations.
Commissioner Fitch, I'll second that motion.
Okay, do we have any discussion?
Yes, and I think this is an important time to have discussion because I think it sort of is a good opportunity to convey all of us why we are going to vote the way that we are. So I'm gonna take an opportunity to say that I'm going to vote for the motion, and I have a lot of internal conflict with that vote, and I'm very frightened, not frightened, but concerned that that we have a good opportunity on the table and that we might lose it. And so it's a really hard vote for me. As I've said, I do think that a lesser amount of time I could come to a yes vote, but it's for me on my vote to deny on this application is solely based on the 15 additional years. A lesser number, I think I could get to an approval vote, but as for today, I'll be voting for the motion to deny.
Thank you, Commissioner McMillan. Anyone else?
Commissioner Whitney, I just want to echo those comments. I know it's something I've had to think about a lot ever since we got this docket is about this overall kind of situation. And I don't envy the job we're giving the Boulder Board of County Commissioners. But I think for me, just looking at trying to narrow it specifically to the Dow Flats land use question and thinking about whether or not that meets the criteria for special use review. It's just really hard for me to grapple with. As I've kind of said, I think there's a lot of justification for why in the short term, having local sources of cement is very valuable to Boulder County, but being able to answer the question of whether we're striking that balance of long-term land use, certainly for something where the long-term land use implications are perhaps a little more understood, like when you're doing a special use review for like a structure and you're like, well, once that structure is built, the community, it exists and the community gets kind of used to it. But continuing mining for 15 years is a very different kind of burden that we're putting on the community for that long of a time frame. And so just kind of narrowing my thinking to that is what really kind of started to lean me towards the idea that I would recommend that we don't approve this special use and let kind of the Board of County Commissioners kind of grapple with some of the larger implications around the contract that's in play here.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Bloomfield. Certainly, if I look at the criteria for this special use review, I have a hard time coming to a place. I mean, I think we've mentioned two of them. I came up with about 5 different reasons that I would deny this just based on the land use merits. I do think it's super complicated. It's a super tough decision. I think losing the guarantee of closing the plant in 15 years is a huge deal. And my hope is that there's enough momentum from other sources in terms of reducing emissions that will actually see a reduction in emissions or a closing of the plant within those 15 years without that requirement. So I will vote in support of denying. I'll vote yes to the motion.
Commissioner Gargano. Yeah, I mean, I've probably made it pretty clear. I don't like letting go of a guaranteed end date. it makes me uncomfortable. It's scary, right? To Gavin's point. But 15 years is too long. And if I were not considering the cement plan at all and just this application, to your point, it's really easy. It's no, we don't want it. We don't want to keep doing it. And that, yeah, just, it's very hard, but I am also going to say, yay, I do not approve the motion. You know, I don't approve the thing, right? Sorry, because we're doing the switch.
You'll vote yes for
I'm in support of the motion.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments? So I will put it to a vote. I'm curious if we feel like after the vote, we need a further statement to commissioners, or do we feel like I'm seeing one yes, I'm seeing one no?
This is Commissioner Goldfarb. I think we should take the vote and then we can maybe move on to that second portion after we take a vote.
Yes.
If we have a motion on the floor.
We have a motion on the floor. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Bloomfield, aye. Commissioner Whitney.
Aye.
Commissioner McMillan.
Aye.
Commissioner Gargano.
Aye.
Commissioner Fitch.
Aye.
And Commissioner Goldfarb. And I don't think I heard you. I saw your mouth move, but I just want to get it on record. You're muted. That's
Aye,
fine.
sorry. Aye.
Okay, so the motion passes unanimously. Do we have any further recommendations that we want to make? I would say these would just be informal. I mean, I think primarily what I'm hearing is that we feel like there's an unknown trade-off, and we would want to know more about the health impacts of mining versus the health impacts of extra trucks on the road. Is there anything else that we want to really emphasize here?
Commissioner Goldfarb, you're muted.
Sorry. It's been a long meeting. I think that there's been discussion about the number of years that we're having difficulty with, and so I would like to convey that to the commissioners as well.
Yeah. So something that would be fewer years.
With the other conditions all being the same, right? With a date of closure.
Yeah, I mean, ideally it would be fewer years with, fewer years for closure of the plant. But I just think that we've gone round and round about the number of years. And I think that if they listen to any of our discussion, that would be really clear. But I think succinctly we could say the number of years for the continuation of mining operations, as well as the number of years before the plant will be closed, both seem too long to us, ideally. And we understand that's not the shorter number of years for both of those things are not before us, but this is what we struggled with.
Yeah. This Commissioner McMillan, I also think that, if there had been a commitment of record to improve the performance of the cement plant as it currently states, or as it currently sits, and I don't know what options are out there to improve it, but that would have carried a lot of weight with me as well. I think ultimately what we're after as a community, as a county, is to decrease the greenhouse gas emissions and the health impacts from that operation. And I know it's a different thing than what we were hearing today, but they're linked, and I just can't separate them. And I would say that if there was a commitment to improve that facility, that I think it would have impacted my decision.
Commissioner
Very good
Rennie.
point.
Yeah,
Go
just
ahead.
Commissioner Rennie, just kind of adding on to that, I feel one of the things that we really clearly heard, I think, from the community is that the community obviously sees this all as one operation. And so things that county health says, things that come out of the EPA or from GEM review are viewed as impacting the land use decisions. And it's really hard when the timeframes are different between when the GEM reviews are happening and when county health is issuing reviews and when the land use questions are happening, to kind of have the county have an overall evaluation at that time. And so we were asked to, look at the land use question, but it's very clear that the community is looking for a review of the whole thing. And I don't know how we get better alignment on all of those inputs. And certainly it's always going to be a struggle for these kinds of operations. But I think the more we could do to align the land use questions with also the other reviews that are happening would make sense to me.
Thanks for that, Chris. As Commissioner Bloomfield, I will say, I want to appreciate all of the public that have given us input and have stuck with us. We still have 39 people watching this with us. So appreciation for all of those folks and their passion and commitment. I'll again say that unless we advocate for using less cement or demand a sustainable alternative, we're not really changing the game. Maybe a little bit locally, but we need to do more and need to keep on it and make sure that we're not just pushing the problem off onto other people. Yeah, I just feel like that's really important. I also want to thank staff for all of their hard work. I know that this has been going on for years. I want to thank the applicant for showing up and for giving what I thought was a really good presentation. I feel like they really answered our questions, so that is certainly appreciated. And if no other commissioners have any comments, I'll throw it over to staff because they had an announcement.
This is Commissioner Whitney. I'll just add one comment onto that, which is you saw how much we struggled with this. And so I also would just encourage the public to acknowledge that this is going to be a complicated decision for the Board of County Commissioners as well, and to have as much empathy for their decision-making process as you can as well.
All right. No one else has anything. I'll give Pete the floor.
Thank you, Commissioner Bloomfield. Just wanted, I know this has been posted in the chat, but wanted to make sure that Planning Commission and all of the members of the public and the applicants listening know that the Board of County Commissioners has scheduled this for a public hearing on Wednesday, September 14th at 2 p.m. That will be held virtually, and anyone wanting to sign up to attend is welcome to do so. The links to that are available in the chat. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Pete. I think we're done. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn this
Second.
commission.
McMillan, a second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for sticking with it. Bye-bye.